Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to do the surprise game Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remastered on the proposed minimum requirement, which is AMD Ryzen 5 2600X or the Intel Core i7-6800K 16GB of RAM, AMD Radeon RX5700 or the GeForce 1070ti. Need the GPU to be DX12 compatible and 125GB of storage on an SSD. Apparently is required. Welcome to Response PC, I'm Dunk. Let's game on. Starting off on the Intel CPU side, I got the i7-6700K instead of the i7-6800K. And this apparently make a difference because the 6700K is a 4-core 8-thread versus the 6800K, which is a 6-core 12-thread, that the system doesn't meet the requirement to play Oblivion. It may run, but some issue may appear. So the issue is the CPU. Your CPU has 4 logical processors and the game require 6 or more. So keep that in mind. If you have a CPU you think is powerful enough, but is lacking the number of core, you may run into issue. I did not personally for the entire testing. Starting off on the Intel CPU side, I got the i7-6700K instead of the i7-6800K. And this apparently make a difference because the 6700K is a 4-core 8-thread versus the 6800K, which is a 6-core 12-thread, that the system doesn't meet the requirement to play Oblivion. It may run, but some issue may appear. So the issue is the CPU. Your CPU has 4 logical processors and the game require 6 or more. So keep that in mind. If you have a CPU you think is powerful enough, but is lacking the number of core, you may run into issue. I did not personally for the entire testing. And with that CPU, I've paired it with the GTX1070ti and 16GB of RAM. They didn't give us any specific on resolution and target FPS, so we're going to be aiming at 1080p to reach 30 FPS or more, and without any upscaling. And the result is quite good, to be honest. We have the GPU in the mid-80s to the mid-90s, so we're not pegged at 100%, so we probably can crank up a bit the settings. We're using 5.4GB of VRAM. The CPU, which has less core / thread than is the recommended minimum requirement, is running at mid-60% of utilization, so we're still good. And for the RAM, we are at 14.2GB of RAM out of 16. We are really close to the maximum RAM, meaning that when you reach a city, it may start to bottleneck at some point. But with all that, we have an average FPS of 64 in the open world and over 100 in dungeons. It varies depending on the dungeons, but it's almost always over 100 FPS. And remember, we don't have any frame generation or upscaling enabled. I also wanted to do a quick test since the GPU was not pegged at 100%. What about cranking the preset to the medium settings? Still no upscaling or frame generation. That gives us a better visual at the cost of some FPS. Now we have an average of 42 FPS in the open world and an average of 52 FPS in dungeon. But we have finally the GPU pegged at 99% of utilization. That's perfect. The CPU utilization didn't change and we have a little drop in the RAM. We're using 12.3GB of RAM out of 16 and compared to 14 at the low settings. It is highly playable since the game is not a shooter and it's not a competitive game either, and I personally want a better visual at the lower FPS than having Vaseline visual at higher FPS. Now for the AMD side of things, we have the Ryzen 5 2600, I don't have the X variant, and the RX5700. This is an 8GB VRAM card. We're playing at the same setting as the Intel CPU and the NVIDIA GPU, meaning 1080p, no upscaling, lowest settings, no frame gen, but we get quite a difference in performance versus the GTX1070ti. As the RX5700, we have a variable GPU utilization from 40% to 90%, but we never peg at 99 or 100%, using 6.2GB of VRAM out of 8. CPU utilization is in the mid-50s, but the RAM, we vary from 14 to 15GB of RAM. We may have a RAM bottleneck here. In the open world, we get an average of 54 FPS. We're just under the 60 FPS at low settings, 1080p and no upscaling. In dungeon, we reach 77 FPS, which is good. You may want to play a bit with some FSR settings if you want to have also 60 FPS in the open world, but my guess is we should try with more RAM, but that tester will go for the real minimum requirement. It's playable, but be aware that the frame rate smoothness is a little bit unstable. In the end, we get a warning for the CPU if you have less than 6 core 12 threads because you need 6 logical CPU core, but with my 4 core 8 thread it seems to have running quite well, even though keep in mind I'm still at the beginning of the game. GPU wise, the GTX1070 Ti run perfectly, can be even lower on the Nvidia side. For the AMD GPU, we need to check what's going on because the RX57 should give a similar result as the GTX1070 Ti, but we have a bottleneck somewhere. And unfortunately, they didn't put any Intel GPU. There's no Arc, Alchemist or Battle Mage in the proposed minimum requirement. And finally, stay tuned as I have multiple videos coming about Oblivion. Thanks for watching, see you on the next one, and subscribe.